What happened in the Industrial Revolution, because then big labor, big business, and big government got together and said pollution was okay because it would be good for jobs. But if you'd have had a strict private property rights position, I was raised in Pittsburgh, and the government threw the sewer went into the rivers, and the smokestacks polluted our cities, and they have no right to do that. So you would have a much stricter control. Even today, cap and trade is a form of capitulation. Say, well, yes, a certain amount of pollution is okay, but you got to buy permits, and you can trade these permits, and we'll trade. Goldman Sachs will trade these permits to pollute. That's not the solution. Property rights is really the only way. Private property is much better cared for than government property.
But that seems to be the case. And I always think the reason why Massachusetts has so many more laws than New Hampshire is because they have so many people. And eventually when you get so many people, someone's going to screw up and you're going to have to pass a law to prevent the one person from doing the wrong thing while 9 people are doing the right thing.
See, I can make the case for saying the more people you have, the less laws you ought to have, because it's too hard to enforce, and if you have to have laws, make them local. Do you want D.C. to run, this state of New Hampshire? I would say no, you don't need to do that. Matter of fact, the city of Pittsburgh was cleaned up a long time before they had the EPA. So, no, I don't think it's necessary. You need just basic laws and rules, like you can't pollute a neighbor's property. You need a lot more restraints and rules against the government. They can't counterfeit our money. They can't pass out money to special interests. There's so much that can be done. But you don't. You need laws like bankruptcy laws. If a company goes bankrupt, they're supposed to go to bankruptcy court, and that's a national issue. But instead, we don't do that. We go and we bail them out illegally. We appropriate money and print money, and the Fed bails them out secretly. So that is what that's where the real problem is. You need bankruptcy laws, you need contract laws, you need property laws, and you need counterfeit laws. Make sure the government doesn't counterfeit our money. So that you need the laws, you need the courts, but you can't allow the special interest to take over. And that is not capitalism, that's cronyism, and it lends itself to fascism. So you see it all over. You see it in the military-industrial complex. There's an educational industrial complex. There's a medical industrial complex. Even the Democrats and Republicans are in charge. They're always taking care of the corporations, the drug companies, and the insurance companies. They keep making money, and the financial. Oh well, we'll have regulations. Well, the regulations usually protects Goldman Sachs and the big banks. So it isn't so much regulation or no regulations. It's who you're going to regulate and how it's done, and it's never should be done to protect the special interests.
Yeah. David, I know you're.
I've got a huge amount of questions. I didn't want to.
We're going to get in the weeds here.
Capitalize with we had the ride along, so I didn't want to take anybody else's time. But I have tons of questions. How would you feel about the Glass-Steagall Act? I know you're not a regulations guy, but a lot of people.
It's interesting because it really gives me the opportunity to talk about what I want to talk about, true free market, like we've been talking about. When they had to vote to repeal Glass-Steagall, I voted no. But if you say, should banks in a free society have the right to invest as they see fit? And I say yes. So how do you reconcile this? So I would not vote to, I would probably vote to put restraints on the banks. But the reason is, not because I'm opposed to free markets, because, and I voted against, I voted against the repeal because that opened up the door to the penalties being placed on the taxpayer because of the insurance. The FDIC and all the guarantees means that we expanded the exposure to the taxpayer. So I voted against it, and I probably voted with liberals and others who voted for a completely different reason, thinking, oh, we need more regulations. So that's where I come down on it. So I think under the circumstances that the taxpayers get stuck for all this boondoggles, and in a way that more or less helped the bailouts, because it meant that the taxpayer was the lender of last resort.
Can I follow up? What about Goldman becoming a bank holding company?
Well, if they never defrauded anybody and told us what we do and it had no protection and no guarantees, people can become whatever they want. But they better not defraud people or they should go to prison for a long, long time.
Because my understanding is now that they're a bank holding company, they've got FDIC protection, and now they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, so they shouldn't be able to under today. That would be part of the talk about the Glass-Steagall. Is if they're going to get protection, no, they shouldn't be allowed to do it. But in a free market, they should be allowed to.
Is it that if we have no bailouts, that would obviously discourage the risky betting and the stuff that got us in trouble? I mean, and I know you're not a regulations guy, but if you just said no bailouts, you're not getting a penny, Goldman, if you screw this up, would that be enough to get them not to take this?
It would help, but they probably have to be, if they defrauded somebody, they probably ought to know they're going to jail. I mean, like Enron, you know, Enron was taken care of with Texas law, local laws, and they defrauded people and they went to jail. We didn't even need the SEC. All those SEC rules and everything, that wasn't the way they were brought down. It didn't prevent them from doing it. So no, you have to, no, there's always going to, you know, man is awful, they get awful tempting, but you can't preempt them and say, we have to regulate everything they do. To me, that would be like coming into the newspaper and say, we need prior restraint because you guys might screw up and say something bad about somebody, so we have to have prior restraint. So you can't have prior restraint on everything a businessman does. But boy, when they mess up, if there's libel or slander, there are restrictions on what you can do. And you're very careful. You know, you don't want new court cases on libel. And that's the way it should be in business. But if they know they'll come down hard, then maybe they'd act more responsibly like most newspapers do and say, you know, we don't need that.
Your ideological purity is appealing. But can you be pragmatic and work with lawmakers, and is it electable?
Well, what they're doing today is known to be a total failure. And I'm probably the most bipartisan without compromising any principles because I build on coalition. So I work with Barney Frank. He comes our way and supports states' rights. I work with Dennis Kucinich, you know, on bringing our troops home. And I work with others liberals on the Patriot Act. So yes, it's very, very practical.
Can you defeat President Obama if you're?
Well, of course, these views are probably the most challenging to him. I mean, because the progressives are disgusted with him. You know, he was supposed to be a peace candidate and bring troops on. Remember, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. I guess you get the Nobel Peace Prize for starting more wars than anybody else. I mean, if you're a true progressive, you cannot be happy. You cannot be happy with him loving the Patriot Act. So I would say he is very vulnerable for somebody that wants to stick to the Constitution and is able to work with the opposition as I have over the years. And even the monetary issue. Think of the coalition I built with the Federal Reserve. I mean, nobody cared about it before. It wasn't a Republican versus Democrat. Now it's a bipartisan issue, and it's a big issue. It's could be the big issue next year because we're going to have a lot of inflation. And the blame is going to be placed on the Fed where it deserves to be put.
Can you give the Obama administration any credit for what they've done over the last 2.5 years? Anything come to mind? Or
they asked me that in a debate the other night.
I think they did.
I said, I'm having trouble. I'm having trouble with that because I like to be generous and work with people, but no, I have trouble. Maybe somebody could make a suggestion, see if I agree with you. But no, the economy's got worse, the spending's got worse, the deficit's worse, the inflation is worse, the war is worse, the civil protection of civil liberties, that is worse.
Get Bin Laden though? Is that?
Yeah, but I don't think it had anything to do with him. I mean, no, I blame George Bush for not having done it 10 years ago. That's where the real problem was.
Do you think the two-party system could be improved in the primary system because coalition builders like yourself often just get excluded out of the primary system? I mean, right? I mean, we're always the base. The primary is all about appealing to your base of your base.
Yeah, people who really believe there's a two-party system are kidding themselves because I think all this back and forth in most of the elections in my lifetime, it's just been talk. I mean, you know, I think to show how close they are together was when the bailout came in 2008. I mean, the two major candidates rushed to Washington and both voted to bail out the special interests, bail out the banks, and bail out the corporations and stick it to the taxpayers. So people who really understand the process don't think there's much. The rhetoric is different, and there's factions who want power. I think they're fighting over power. It's all demagoguing and claiming a political victory. That's what everybody's doing. Do you think they really are worried about the deficit and the debt? They're worried about who's going to score points. So it's just one party. They have the same foreign policy. They have the same monetary policy. Republicans talk about, oh no, there's too much entitlements. They expand the entitlement system. So yes, there's room for another party.
I was going to say, have you
There
thought
has
about
to be
this?
something else. But the two parties, the one thing they agree on is sticking it to any alternative, because you can't get on ballots. You know, I tried it. You spend all your money trying to get on a ballot. All the laws are biased against you. And, would I be in the debates if I was running on an alternative party? No. Would the newspapers have me? Maybe you would.
Yeah.
But no, it's just not. You're not going to be credible in our political system. So the two parties do this. They march us forward. The Democrats have to prove they're tough on war, and the Republicans get in and say they have to be charitable on entitlements, and neither care about your civil liberties.
So what are the other candidates? I saw you with. I was in Manchester and saw the debate, which was fun and interesting, and it seems like you and Michelle Bachmann were the two stars, the media stars in that debate. But how do the other candidates treat you? I mean, I know they treat you respectfully, but what do you think they think of you when you're standing there or in the back room? Because you're criticized. I mean, they're so locked in together, and Democrats do the same thing. I mean, it's always the 11th commandment, right? I guess on both sides. So what do you think they think? What do you think they think of you?
Well, that's a lot of presumption. I know what I hope they think of me, because I'm sure they don't agree with me, but I hope they say, well, they usually do say, well, he is consistent, and hopefully they're respectful in saying, these are interesting ideas, but are they practical, No, I think, and on a one-to-one basis, even last go-around, this go-around, I've never had, a conversation that saying, why are you doing that? And it was never any expressions of disgust or dislike. Mostly, the gentlemen and gentleladies, I guess, now. So there have been that, but probably they would be happier if I wasn't up there. But,
You're doing well financially, Congressman. The second quarter on your website, you're twice as much money as you had 4 years ago in the second quarter. That's wonderful.
I didn't know that figure. That's very good. I'm
Yeah.
glad you checked on that
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
I know things are going well.
4.5 million for the second quarter as of this morning, and you were 2.7 million back in 2007. So could be at 5 million by the end of the day. I think the original goal was 3 million, so you're surpassing that.
We did okay. I've always been amazed at, because I've never been that much into fundraising.
But the grassroots effort, it's just people, ordinary people like us, just kicking in. It's not the big corporations, which is refreshing.
Yeah, no, that encourages me, because some days I'd like to think, well, I did my job, now I can take a rest. But people, when you see literally hundreds of thousands sending in small amounts of money and urging me to keep doing it, I thought, well, this is what we're supposed to do.
Our very own congressman had a $1,500 plate dinner last night as his fundraiser, Frank Ginta, and it just seemed like it takes the average person out of that realm. It just seems like it's all about money, which I don't want it to be about money.
Yeah, it's an investment, that's too often the case. But a political action committee or a PAC that is looking for, manipulation of a regulation or a tax code or a special benefit, I don't interact with them, because they don't give me money and they don't come to me. So I don't have, my schedule's a little bit different. As a matter of fact, during the day when I'm in office in Washington, more so than ever before, my visitors are usually young people, high school kids and college people coming in.
One thing I always want